you're coming up on 50 years old, right?
Year and a half.
Year and a half.
Sort of, yeah. I think a year and a half.
How long of those 50 years have you been doing martial arts?
Okay, so an exact number always involves me pulling out my calculator.
Okay.
So martial arts for me has always been a family thing, right? I had a cousin who had a really huge martial arts school, karate school in Brownsville, Texas. And he's older than I am, and he started teaching when he was 15. He had a black belt and his own school at 15 years old.
Holy cow.
So my uncle, Augie, was his business manager and ran the business side of it, and Robert taught. So by the time he was 18, 19 years old, he was hosting tournaments literally with thousands of people that would show up. They would host them either in Brownsville, Texas, or across the border in Matamoros, Mexico. And, it was like a 2-day thing. Competitors coming in just to compete. It was awesome.
Wow.
I mean, think OG Karate Kid.
Yeah.
It was that big.
So what made Robert so special? Like
He just got it. He just got it. The other cool thing about his school was that it was on Boca Chica Boulevard. And if you're down there from the valley, you know that Boca Chica's like, it's rough. It's rough. He was successful enough that he bought himself a BMW, and they stole his BMW right from in front of his karate school.
Oh my goodness.
So, it was. It was just a rough area and whatever, but he was successful at it, did it for a long time, ventured into professional boxing for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, due to a car accident, he was medically taken out of the game, which was hard for him, but, things happen, life happens, you move on, move forward. He's successful in other areas of his life now.
Right. So did you train with him at
No,
the time?
I did not, because, we're talking like a 24-hour car ride.
Ah, gotcha.
And, hopping on a plane and going down there on a regular basis to do that was just not it. But my uncle, my other uncle, he did martial arts as well. And he was a black belt. He had trained for years, and in the mid 1980s, everybody wanted to be in martial arts. Everybody had an uncle or a dad or a cousin or something that was a 15th degree black belt that they glow in the dark and
right.
that kind of stuff. So we were always talking about it as kids, wanting to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And he did do it. Obviously, there's not 15 degrees of black belt, but he was a black belt, probably like a first or second degree at the time.
In what style?
Taekwondo.
Okay.
Which was popular back then, Junri.
Uh-huh.
So this is not the American Taekwondo Association. This was Junri's association. I don't remember exactly what it's called off the top of my head, but Junri was big, very instrumental in bringing Taekwondo to the United States. They did some very reputable things in the 70s and 80s. They were pretty big. He was invited to the White House. They did stuff there. So it was pretty cool back in the day.
Did Taekwondo, did that come from China or Japan?
Taekwondo came from Korea.
Korea. Shows how much I know.
Play again.
So your first exposure then was Taekwondo.
So Taekwondo is from Korea, but Taekwondo is a form of karate.
Okay.
So karate is a generic term.
Right.
Okay, and this is important for people to know, especially my students who are listening. Karate is a generic term that covers several different styles of martial arts that focus on kicking, blocking, and punching.
Gotcha.
So, and Taekwondo is one of those. Within those styles, they will then focus on whether they kick more, whether they punch more, how they stand, it just, that varies. Mm-hmm. Taekwondo is known for kicking. They're kickers, and they're good at it.
Right.
But yeah, so my first exposure was more, because he had a black belt in Taekwondo, but he had Shotokan karate experience, which comes from Japan. Gichin Funakoshi was the founder of Shotokai, which we call Shotokan here in the United States.
Yep.
And he had that as his OG base. So that was more of what he was showing me and stuff. And it was very informal.
Right.
He would practice on me. Didn't hurt me. Didn't beat me up. But then he would teach me some things here and there. But that started probably when I was 11 or 12. But my formal training Started when I was 14.
Gotcha. That's what, hey, we started at the same age.
See?
That's wild.
Kismic.
Huh. Yeah, so usually when I explain to people the difference between like Kenpo, Jitsu, which is what we do, and karate, which again, correct me if I'm wrong, anywhere in there. Like karate's always seemed more rigid and traditional, whereas the kind of style we do now is a little bit more practical. But we're going to get into that later. So, and I'm excited to talk about that. But so you start your official training when you're 14. You competed at points of your training.
I did.
At what point did you start that?
So, well, I got to actually go one year to Texas and compete at Battle of the Border at my cousin Robert's tournament. And it was intimidating. I fought a couple rounds again. Well, not like a couple rounds, a couple different fights.
Yeah.
There's rounds within the fights, but it's, you're working your way up to like grand champion, and those are, each fight is a round with rounds in it. But anyway, so a couple guys from Mexico were my opponents, and I didn't know all the rules because the way we trained for self-defense and we trained for the street. I was trying to learn the rules of the tournament so I could play the game.
Right.
I ended up getting disqualified. So,
Did you throw a head kick?
You can't kick him there. You can't. Well, I don't remember. No, I didn't kick him in the head because I wasn't kicking that high back then. I think it was for excessive force. I think I hit him too hard or kicked him too hard.
And you were roughly how old?
14.
You were 14. That was at the beginning.
No, I wasn't 14. That's a lie. Sorry. I was 16 when that happened. So I've been training for a couple of years.
Gotcha.
But at 14, I was 6'1" and I weighed 195 pounds. So I was full grown. So 16 was 2 years in that body.
You were a swimmer too.
I was.
Right? Yeah, and you were swimming at that time.
I played football, and I swam. I actually quit football to swim. Wow. And the football coaches laughed at me for that. They're like, see you 2 days, England. I'm like, not this year, coach. I'm gonna go swim. Okay, that's funny. We'll see it. I'm like, no. And I did. I lettered in high school. I lettered in swimming.
Nice.
So I was pretty good at it.
Did you do any other competition outside of that Battle of the Border?
I did. A couple local competitions, put on by some different schools and stuff like that. I traveled out to Indianapolis with my buddy Steve and competed down there for something. Again, most of my competitions ended in disqualification. So, because I just, you get in the moment, you forget, if you're not doing it on a regular basis, you forget the rules.
Suddenly, a lot of your instructions make a lot more sense.
You just, but if I'm in the street, I'm gonna kick him there.
So I have to ask the question of just like, did pop culture and martial arts at that time influence you? Like, did that help you get into it? Because you said like everybody in like the mid.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's like when did Karate Kid come out?
Mid 80s.
Mid 80s.
So absolutely, Miyagi.
Bruce Lee was before that.
And Bruce Lee was even a bigger. See, the thing is that they made the Karate Kid movie because my generation was so excited about Bruce Lee.
Gotcha.
Bruce Lee's one of his bigger films is Enter the Dragon.
Yep.
And that came out in 1973, I believe. So by the time my generation is 10 years, 11, 12 years old, that movie's already 10 years old. And there's already been a big change in cinematics and stuff like that. So, but because we wanted it, they gave it to us.
Yeah.
And there was a Daniel LaRusso and there was a Johnny in every school in America.
Of course. I feel like there still is.
Oh, well, culture's changed a little bit, but yeah, to some degree.
Yeah.
I mean, we were very cookie cutter. You could walk into high school and go, that kid's Daniel, that kid's Johnny.
So was everybody like at that time then doing martial arts? Just like,
not everybody, but everybody wanted to.
Gotcha.
But there was a guy that I went to school with, and I never trained with him. I never trained with his dad, but he and I were friends from like third grade, and his dad had a pretty decent school. And a lot of the guys that I went to school with trained with his dad. So some of them were cool, some of them were jerks. And so, I mean, we ran into typical stuff like that. One of the guys that trained with him picked a fight with me one day at school, and, I went to go at it, and, the guy's son, who was my friend, like, broke it up. He's like, no, you guys don't want to do that. whatever. We had some of that
Right.
in real life.
So you talk about too a lot. You bring it up all the time of how you would like fit in for throws working at that community pool that you worked at.
So I got those.
So that was so you were doing like taekwondo, that sort of stuff. But at what point did you start incorporating like more judo throw and stuff?
So here, let me start taking you through the process, okay? Because we're kind of getting out of step here. So my uncle had a black belt in taekwondo, but before he trained in taekwondo, he trained in Shotokan karate, and he trained for a number of years in Shotokan. His experience shows me that what you start in tends to be what you gravitate towards naturally. Usually, there are exceptions to that rule, and I'll give a shout out to James O'Connor, who started off as a taekwondo guy. Very good kicker, excellent kicker. He said if it's not BJJ or Muay Thai, it doesn't matter. That's what he told me recently. And that's where he's at now. That's where he's landed, and he's really, really good at those things. He's a great grappler. But that's the exception to the rule.
Right.
I mean, there are other people out there that would fit into that category, but for most people, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe that they gravitate to what they started in. So when my uncle exposed me to martial arts, he exposed me to the Shotokan style of fighting, of martial arts. But there was a tragedy in my life when I was 14 that was pretty significant. And in that, he attempted to bond with me and to help me navigate through that time. And his way of doing that was through martial arts training. I wanted to do it. He wanted to spend some time with me. He wanted to invest in me to make sure that I was going to get through this dark time of my life. So one, he talked my mom into letting me take classes because she was terrified that I was going to get hurt.
Right.
And then two, he paid for everything because we couldn't afford it. So, and then we started training. And the style that we started with was Haikoru Jiu-Jitsu, which was a style of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. So that, coupled with the Shotokan, is really my base. And the Haikoru Jiu-Jitsu is very similar to the Kenpo that we do now.
What is the because we do a little bit of judo, a little bit of jiu-jitsu. What's the main difference between those two styles?
Okay, so when I, for the sake of this conversation,
Yes.
when you say jiu-jitsu, let's assume you mean Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
And when you're talking about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, go ahead and say BJJ.
BJJ.
Okay. Because my history is Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So Japanese jiu-jitsu dates back BC, before Christ. Okay?
Dang.
Yeah, very old. And out of Japanese jiu-jitsu has come many other styles of martial arts. Judo is one of them. So Jigoro Kano wanted a way for people to demonstrate and compete with their style of art without killing each other
Right.
or hurting each other severely. And in that, he developed judo. So they're not different. Judo's a part of.
So okay. So like judo competitions where it's just you throw them to the mat and then it's a point. That came out of Japanese jiu-jitsu as just a part of it.
Yes. So now here's the other thing too. When you do a judo match and you throw them to the mat, if they land a certain way, it's ippon,
Right.
full point, match over, you win. But if you don't, it gets into grappling. And there is points awarded for submission, for control, for reversal, for all of those, you know what I mean? For all of those things.
Yep.
The thing is that these guys train hard to get that throw to boom.
Right.
You know what I mean? They want to get them to land hard, land square on their back, so they get that.
Yeah.
They get that point. But they are good grapplers, and they're good at
Yeah.
the other things. Not as good as the BJJ guys.
Right. Because that's all they do pretty much.
Because their game is different.
Yeah.
It's a slight variation of the same thing.
Gotcha. So, okay, you do some competitions and stuff through your high school years. At what point do you at what point does opening your own school like really seriously cross your mind for the first time?
Oh, I've had the dream of opening my own school since I was a teenager. I mean,
Well, like
since shortly thereafter, because my cousin did it in Texas, and if he's
Yeah.
doing it in Texas, why can't I do it? And you know, the problem was though, I really wanted to do it. I had a passion for it, but I didn't see it as viable because at that time, it all centered around competition. In order to have a successful school, in order to have a big school, you had to win competitions, and then you had to get your students winning competitions, and you had to have 6-foot trophies in your window, and that
Right.
kind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Like my buddy's dad had a school, and it was pretty successful as far as schools go back then, but it wasn't something that supported him financially that he could focus on just as a job. He put a lot into it, but if I remember correctly, he was a single dad. So he wasn't married.
Yeah.
He had boys, no girls to look after. So his focus was different, but he always worked a regular job. So and his dojo was literally his garage.
Wow.
Nice dojo, nice garage, but that's what it was. So a lot of sacrifice, and some, ingenuity
Right.
to make it happen. So for me to do it as a job, I didn't see it as viable in the beginning. I wanted it. I had to be exposed to some other things growing up and then becoming a young man before I realized it was something we could do.
Right. So then, how old were you when you? So your faith plays a role in this,
Yes.
for sure, because you go from, I imagine, more of a secular outlook on life, and from what you've told me about your early life, definitely so, to then opening a Christ-centered ministry as a school. So kind of fill in the gap there.
So God is amazing because God is always working behind the scenes. I mean, he's not really, but from our perspective, he is. He's working, and we just don't understand the width and the depth and the breadth of who he is and what he does. But he's always there kind of behind the scenes working. And so in that, you could go all the way back to when my uncle was a teenager, the one that got me started in martial arts, and he's sitting at a youth event at church, and this evangelist from Tennessee comes up and puts on a kung fu demonstration. And that's what sparked in him the desire to do martial arts, was this evangelist. So, and then fast forward years later, I actually ended up meeting this evangelist through a completely different person, unbeknownst to me, that he had influenced my uncle.
Do you remember what his name was?
Mike Crane was his name. So anyway, so that was going on at the time, even though I wasn't, that wasn't my focal point for my martial arts, because it wasn't my focal point for my life. But then even then, when I'm training in jiu-jitsu and I'm working towards getting my black belts and I'm training with these guys, and it was a very secular lifestyle in those days, but then they started kind of dropping out of social stuff because they were all developing a relationship with Jesus.
Interesting.
It was interesting. It's like, oh, really? Yeah. So where's so-and-so been? Oh, he's, found God. And oh, okay. So anyway, fast forward a little bit farther, and I had been teaching full-time at a school. It was my full-time job, working for somebody else when I got married. That fell apart. We moved to South Bend. I needed to teach. There was this desire within me. We were literally hanging out with some people after church. And I said, okay, I said to the guys, it was a bunch of young married couples. I said to the guys, who wants free karate lessons? If I don't teach, I'm going to die. And of course, they're all, kind of macho. Yeah, let's do it. It sounds awesome. And one of the guys' wives said, have you ever thought about doing anything at the church? It's like, no, you can't do martial arts. That doesn't work. They won't let that. And my wife, Jenny, said, don't dismiss it. Pray about it. And so I did. And we started walking through doors. And Life for Christ Karate Ministries has been around 23 years.
Wow. So you were in your mid-20s?
Oh, let's see. Do you want me to pull up my calculator? Let me pull up my calculator.
Go for it, yeah.
let's see how old I was. So that was October of 1998 that we actually started Life for Christ Karate. I was 25.
Wow. That's wild. And it started out pretty small then, just a bunch of married guys.
No, actually, Life for Christ, those guys never did anything. They were all a bunch of, as guys, we're a bunch of hot air. Oh, yeah,
course,
let's
yeah.
do it. All right, let's climb Mount Everest. Oh, yeah, I'm in.
Wait, what time do we have to get up to train? Oh, never mind.
Exactly.
So, you open the school mid-20s. It's a Taekwondo school.
No.
Karate. It's a karate school. What was it?
I feel we're a little disjointed here.
We might be.
So
Okay.
I did Japanese jiu-jitsu starting off, right?
Right.
And then while I was there, I cross-trained in actual Shotokan karate with an instructor there. His name was Dave Benedict. So I start with Haiko-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. In that same school, there's a gentleman named Dave Benedict who does Shotokan karate. I cross-train with him. I end up testing for my Shodan, my first degree black belt in Haiko-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu under Bernie Zahner. I also tested then a few months later for my first degree black belt in Shotokan Karate under Dave Benedict. Bernie Zahner was the head of the school. Mm-hmm. He decided that he did Tai Chi as well. Mm-hmm. He did a boxing version of Tai Chi.
Interesting.
It was really cool. They whooped each other pretty good. But he decided he wanted to go to China. So he sold his house, which was our school, and he moved to China. So a group of us who were black belts decided to try to keep the school alive and keep it going. And we did for a year, maybe two, maybe not even that long. But it didn't work. It just didn't work out.
Yeah.
Everybody had their opinions on how things should go. There was two people trying to drive the bus. Didn't work out. So Bernie's in China. He ended up being there for like 12 years. And Dave Benedict was a black belt in Shotokan, but he wasn't like a head instructor or anything. So he really didn't have. He was just another guy there that was, trying to take leadership and not really, in control. So he had a regular job and whatever. So we all just kind of fell apart. And I didn't have a school, didn't have a place to train, didn't have anybody to train with, and whatever. That lasted for a little bit, and then my uncle, calls me up and says, "Hey, I've got my son, your cousin, enrolled at this Taekwondo school. You need to go check it out because this guy's looking for instructors." I don't know Taekwondo.
Right.
And quite honestly, traditionally speaking, Japanese Okinawan martial artists and Korean martial artists are not of the same mindset and therefore don't play well together.
Yeah. I believe that.
The Shotokan guys are saying, Taekwondo, we're not doing Taekwondo garbage. And so I was not interested in going, but my uncle was a mentor in my life for sure. And he said, "You need to go check it out." "No, I'm not going to go check it. You need to go check it out." "No, I'm not going to go check it out." "Yes, sir." So I walk into the school and I check it out, and it looks like Shotokan. Why does this look like, this all looks like Shotokan? This doesn't look like Taekwondo. I've seen Taekwondo. My uncle has a black belt in Taekwondo. I go check it out, and I comparing the two, and it's like, this doesn't look like Taekwondo. Come to find out, the style of Taekwondo that they're doing is called Blue Wave Taekwondo. Blue Wave Taekwondo was started by a Korean gentleman who had studied martial arts, who had studied Shotokan under Gichin Funakoshi in Japan. So pre-World War II, this guy is studying at the University of Tokyo. While he's studying at the University of Tokyo, he studies under Gichin Funakoshi, who's the father of Shotokan, father of modern-day karate. He gets up to like third degree black belt under Funakoshi. Then he goes back to Korea, because he's Korean. That's where life's at for him.
Right.
And opens Blue Wave Taekwondo. So they're basically sister arts.
Interesting. So he comes from I'm just seeing if I got this right. He comes from Korea, having been trained in Taekwondo.
No,
No,
he goes from Korea
Okay, he
to
just goes-
Japan to study at the University of Tokyo.
gotcha. And then he learns
He learns Shotokan while he's there.
Shotokan, brings it back, and then develops Blue Wave.
Blue Wave Taekwondo. Yeah. So and that at that time, the school that I've gone into, because my uncle told me to go check it out. At that time, that school was affiliated with the Taekwondo program at Indiana University. So that was the type of Taekwondo they were teaching at Indiana University.
Gotcha.
And the head of that program at the time was Master Don Burns. Come to find out years later, Master Don Burns and my old instructor, Bernie Zahner, had been friends and had trained together in Hapkido and in Judo. So it's just small world.
So again, then you entered that. You started going to that school then. Did you instruct or did you
I was a
learn?
teacher. I went to work
Right.
there. The guy hired me right off the bat
Because you were familiar with Shotokan.
because our styles were that similar. I had to learn some name change stuff.
Yeah.
I had to learn to focus a little bit different on my approach to fighting, so that I was in line with the school. So that's important in martial arts. And
Right.
pay attention, kids. Take notes. Whatever school you're in, if you're a student, or even at this point for me a teacher, I have to honor that school. And if I can't do that, then I shouldn't be there. And I have to respect what they do and the way they do it.
Right.
And I can't be trying to, take things my own direction. So the way the names of certain things, how I counted, kicking more than what I was. And I talked about, the tournaments and stuff, and I said that I kick him in the head, and I said, no, I wasn't kicking at the head at that time. This was a Taekwondo school, even though it was based more on Shotokan, it was still Taekwondo. So these guys were kicking high. I never kicked above the waist. I couldn't kick above my waist. My old instructor had said, if you want to kick a guy in the head, you break his leg when he falls down, kick him in the head. Okay, it's easy enough. Well, now at 20, 21 years old, I've got 10-year-olds looking at me laughing, Mr. England can't kick above his waist.
Is this the point where you start doing the splits?
This is the point where we do 3 months of intensive training, and part of that is gaining flexibility and partner stretching, and you would just the stretching, you'd leave out of there just sweating, whimpering, but at 48 I could still kick to my head.
Yeah.
So yep. Got way above my belt.
So by the time you open your own school, how many styles roughly have you trained under and learned?
So Haikoro Jiu-Jitsu, Shotokan Karate. I spent about 8 months studying Aikido with a Filipino gentleman, and that was about it. With the jiu-jitsu, there was judo involved, so
Right.
I knew out of the 65 judo throws they had at the time, I knew 2/3 of them.
Gotcha. So when you open Life for Christ Karate Ministries, how is that connected to? Well, I'm just going to establish this. How is this connected to the federation?
Okay, so go back to the conversation I had with the young lady who said, "Why have you ever thought about trying something at the church?"
Yeah.
And I said, "No way.
Yeah.
There's no way." So I went into the pastor of the church at the time. I said, "Hey, we want to do a karate program here at the church." I didn't try to sell it. I didn't try to spin it. I didn't try to talk about the benefits. I just said,
Gave
this
it
is
as
what
it
we
is.
want to do.
Yeah.
Blah. So he said, "It's a great idea." I was like, "What do I do with that?
How
I
about
don't know what to do with that. You're supposed to say no, dude. What do you mean it's a great idea? Okay, all right, what do I do with this?" He says, "You got to talk to this pastor. This is an associate pastor." Like, oh, this is where it's going to die. Okay, I got it. Same thing. Walked into his office. We want to do a karate program here at the church. Great idea. Oh. So now what? So I decided to go home, and there was this don't look at me strange, boys. There was this brand new thing called Google.
That dates this whole conversation.
And I Googled Christian martial arts. Back then, I didn't Google Christian martial arts. I looked up Christian martial arts on Google.
Oh, yeah.
Because we weren't Googling things yet.
Google
there was
wasn't a verb yet.
No, it wasn't, because there was still Yahoo and other things. But anyway, so I Googled it, and it actually popped up. It's like there are people doing Christian martial arts throughout the world. I mean, literally all over the world. I was like, wow, this is going. How did I not know about this? So, and it just so happens within like a month, there was a conference in Indianapolis called Meeting of the Masters with an organization called the Gospel Martial Arts Union. And I'm like, let's check this out. So I got some of my guys together that we had been training at the time. We borrowed the church van and we headed down to Indianapolis for Meeting of the Masters. And out of that, I met a bunch of great people who I still have wonderful relationships with this day, who love the Lord and are good traditional, what I would call good traditional martial artists who value quality. So, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that just kind of sell garbage to make a buck.
And that's both secular and Christian. Have you found that a lot of Christian based martial arts aren't as quality?
No. There's a lot of martial arts out there in general that just aren't quality, because it's guys who, want to make $1 and they want to, I mean, it's a lucrative business. But in that, people look at it more as a business than they do as a self-defense or a way of life or a philosophy, or I mean, however you want to approach it. It's more to them about a buck. One of the reasons I stopped teaching right after I got married was that the guy that ran the school where I worked saw everybody as a dollar sign. Tuition, tournaments, pro shop sales, belt tests, black belt. I mean, he could tell you what every person was worth dollar-wise, and I didn't see that. I saw people, and that bothered me a lot. And there are other guys out there like that. So anyway.
How is this, do we want to talk about, because are we a part of the federation anymore, of the, like, connected to Wyoming, Michigan, and them?
So let's go back to the GMAU.
To the what?
Gospel Martial Arts Union.
Okay.
The GMAU.
Okay.
Out of that, see, when the school that I was part of broke up, that federation was gone.
Right.
That overarching association above and outside of just the school. And then I went to work for a guy, and then he was part of IU Bloomington, part of that federation, International Federation of Taekwondo Instructors or whatever. And then after I left his employment, I was still associated with IU Bloomington independently, but then they had a changing of the guard. Master Burns had a stroke and retired, and young guys took over. They took it in a different direction that just didn't line up with who we were, which is fine. But now what do? So we affiliated ourselves with the Gospel Martial Arts Union for a period. Through them, we met a guy named Bill Church out of Wyoming, Michigan, and he had a federation called the For Christ Federation, and we ended up joining that, and we're part of that organization today.
And so when you started then the ministry at Calvary Baptist, you were immediately affiliated with Kicks for Christ?
No, we were going for a few years before we met Bill Church.
Gotcha.
When we started, we were still associated with IU Bloomington. That's how we were running things through. And at that time, I was not teaching jiu-jitsu.
Right.
I was just teaching karate.
Right. And that's how long did Life for Christ Karate Ministries focus on karate?
Oh, shoot.
Because that was until recently, right?
It's just we've made the full transition to a Kenpo school within the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So, and we consider we've been going for 23 years.
And when did you start?
So what happened is that karate's great.
Yeah.
But it's limited.
Right.
It is. Kenpo Jitsu, Haiko-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu for that matter, that I did is more like martial arts street fighting. We can kick, we can punch, we can block, we can throw, we can, we're proficient at all ranges of fighting. And in that's what you need to do in order to defend yourself. You got to be good. You got to be solid as a fighter in all areas. And so when I was teaching just karate, I felt like I was stopping short all the time. It drove me nuts. But I didn't have any place else to go because that association, that affiliation, that federation, that whatever you want to call it, was gone and didn't exist anymore. So I went to the Kicks for Christ Federation, and they had Taekwondo people, they had Tang Sudo people, they had people who did Shang-Ti Kenpo and, all kinds of stuff, BJJ and whatever. And I went to them and I said, hey, look, I want to do Japanese jiu-jitsu. This is where I started. This is where my heart and soul are at. I want to get back to it, but I need somebody to give us accreditation, somebody to give us oversight, somebody to, say, hey, look, this guy's just not some yahoo making this garbage up. And they said, okay, we'll put together a curriculum, train some students. We'll take a look at it, and we'll let you know what we think. I respected that. So I went back and started version 1 of the curriculum, and there's been several versions. We're still fine-tuning it even today. But we started doing that, and we started training guys. And matter of fact, out of the whole school, we had one class we could have focused on.
That's what the 8 o'clock class
That's
was.
what the 8 o'clock class is.
Oh, there was a purpose to it. Okay.
See?
I see.
So we did that for, I don't know, a couple of years, 2-3 years, and got guys that were good enough then to present to a board. And we went up to Wyoming, Michigan, and stood in front of this board, and he was pretty intimidating. These guys are, I was in my early mid-30s at the time. They were in their late 40s, early 50s. So they had age on me. They had years of experience on me in martial arts. One guy was a martial arts historian in a part of Mensa. And if you don't know, Mensa is a club for people who have genius IQs and higher.
Wow.
It was intimidating. And I did this presentation, and they grilled us and asked all kinds of questions and wanted demonstrations. And at one point, one of the guys on the panel got up from behind the table and comes around the front. And he's like, demonstrate this on me. And it's like, oh, we're going to go. Okay. So we made it through like 3.5, 4 hours of this. And then they wanted to confer, right? They're going to go talk. And they come back and they said, okay, jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu is this. You picture, a circle that's the size of a dime. And what you showed us was bigger. So like the size of a $50. I don't know. Pick a small circle, big circle.
Right.
Small circle was the jiu-jitsu. Big circle is what I showed them. They said, if you're willing to call it Kenpo Jitsu, we'll support it. I'm like, what does that even mean? What is Kenpo Jitsu?
Yeah.
I don't, what? It's like I tell people, it's like I was standing on a tiled floor, and I'm standing in one tile, and all the other tiles fall away, and there's an abyss around me. I'm like, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know where, So I looked at him and I said, can I think about it? Do I have to answer right now? No, you can think about it. So I went and I checked out, I, again, Googled Kenpo Jitsu. And I found there's Kenpo Karate, Ed Parker. It's amazing. Kenpo Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, I've heard of that. But what is Kenpo Jitsu? So it means fist law.
Okay.
And I found a guy who was doing something, and it looked similar to what I was teaching. Like, okay, fine. Somebody's doing it. I don't care. It's a name.
Yeah.
I need to teach. And I believe in what we're doing. I believe, in teaching people to be, I believe when it comes to martial arts and when it comes to defending yourself, to be as violent as you need to be. So in that, if they push you, you don't haul off and break their nose. But if they pull a knife on you, you don't cower in fear and just wait to die. You handle things appropriately. So, and I believe that ours is not the only way to do that, but it's a good way to do that. So, what's the name? Kenpo Jitsu, whatever.
Right.
That's fine. So that's how we landed on that. I wasn't so much hung up on the name as making sure that it was quality. And I spent years working on that. And I took it to an outside source with outside people who are not a part of our school, who have years and years of traditional martial arts experience. They're not McDojos. And they looked at it and evaluated it. And so I feel good about it. And we're producing quality students. At this point, I let my students do the talking. I let what you guys do in your techniques and your abilities speak for itself.
Cool. So that moment where you went to the board of the Kicks for Christ Federation and pitched Kenpo Jitsu, you said that was your early 30s.
Yeah.
So that was between 15 and 20 years ago. So when I joined,
no, it's not that long ago. Okay, let me think about this again here.
Okay.
Because I don't know what year it is right now.
Because I was about to say it, like, because when I joined the school, which was almost 11 years ago.
So 10 years ago, I was 38.
Yeah.
So I was probably in my mid-30s.
Okay. So when I joined the school about 11 years ago, it was still considered karate, taekwondo. We didn't make that full swing to Kenpo Jitsu until, like you said, like three-ish years ago. So what was going on then between the point of it getting approved, getting a name stamped on it, and then over that next decade?
So when I did Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, everybody at the school was like 14 or older. There were no kids. I mean, 14 is a kid, but it's not a little kid.
Right.
And then I spent a lot of time teaching karate, and I taught from ages 4 to 64 and everybody in between. And karate is kind of easy to do that because you don't throw people on the ground. You don't choke people out.
Right. It's basic.
So how am I going to teach everybody Kenpo Jitsu? So it was a matter of figuring out how to make this something that we could do for everybody, and how we were going to introduce things at what time to make them age appropriate. And,
Right.
And this last week we did a joint lock that we haven't done in a long time. It's not one I want to put in the everyday arsenal, but it's necessary to have. Every now and then you need a 50 caliber sniper rifle, and it's a special tool for a special time. And this is a special tool for a special time. But we taught it to all the kids, ages 6 and up, and they got it. So we're figuring it out.
Cool.
How to apply it to the masses.
So it's just been a process of applying it to the masses.
Process of transition.
Right.
Process of transition. And the whole thing's been, we've been at this for 23 years. We're just getting started.
Yeah.
We're really just getting started because when I started, I had no idea where God was going to take this. And I, as it was succeeding, as we're getting yeses, yes, you can do this here. Yes, we'll provide you with a space. Yes, we want to take classes. What do I do with this? And how is it a ministry as opposed to a regular martial arts school?
Right.
What's the difference?
Right.
Pastor friend of mine, Doc Harrelson, now of Liberty, Missouri, said to me, in order for it to be ministry, you have to bring people in touch with the Word of God. So we make sure that we do that. But in that, it's more than that. We're journeying with people. It took me several years just to figure out that we're not just a karate school. We're not just a martial arts school, Kenpo school, judo school, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
We are a faith-based mentoring ministry that teaches martial arts. So when I show up to work every day, martial arts is important, and I want it to be quality because I want people to learn to protect themselves and be safe. But that's not my number one. Not my number one.
Right.
Matter of fact, I had a kid today, right before we started today, he texted me, and he's got something going on in his life spiritually that he needs to be taken care of, needs to be dealing with. and he's older, but he also wants to get some new sparring gear. And he's like, "Hey, so when can I get my gear?" And I'm like, "Hey, did you take care of this other thing you were supposed to take care of?" And he's like, "Hey, no, we'll talk gear when you take care of this."
Right.
That's our number one focus.
Yeah. And I've definitely seen that being at the school for 10 plus years of, because you've been a huge part of that in my life, and I know you've made a huge impact on other people's lives. So that's super cool. And have you noticed? Have you found that it's more difficult to pitch the school as a ministry to like somebody who hasn't heard of it? Like, if you're trying to sound legit, like, do you find that it's hard to be like, "Oh, we're a ministry," as opposed to "we're a school"?
So my hurdles are severalfold, because martial arts, taekwondo, judo, even karate, sport karate, they are sports. Mm-hmm. They have rules. They have sports federations. Judo is governed by the Olympic governing body. Mm-hmm. They keep score. They have tournaments that lead to higher tournaments that lead to the Olympics. What we do does not do that.
Right.
So I have to help people understand that, well, I'm going to pull my kid out of karate to do baseball because he wants to do a different sport. You're not pulling him out of one sport to put him in another sport.
Right.
You're pulling him out of an opportunity to learn goal setting skills and to learn leadership skills and to learn to defend himself and to have the Bible shared with him at every possible opportunity to go play Little League. And Little League's great. Don't get me wrong. Soccer's great. Football's great. I enjoy sports, but you're not pulling him out of one to put him in another. You're pulling him out of this to have him do something completely different.
Yeah.
The thing is people look at it as a physical activity. It is physical. So to them, in their mind, it's the same, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
So that's one hurdle I got to overcome. Then the next hurdle I got to overcome is that, it's not just a karate school. We're here to help them seek God in all that they do. For us, the essence of black belt is Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, do it with all of your heart, as doing it for the Lord and not for men. So relationships, schoolwork, regular work, whatever you do, things you enjoy doing, things you don't enjoy doing, and then teaching them what that looks like.
Right.
For little kids, you go clean your room and you shove all your dirty clothes under your bed. You're not doing your best for the Lord.
Yeah.
You take that peanut butter and jelly sandwich and shove it in your pillowcase. Nope, that's your best for the Lord. Or you do clean your room and it's the cleanest it's ever been. Like a commercial, you walk in and things kind of sparkle. Things that shouldn't sparkle because it's just that clean. But you grumbled and complained the whole time you did it. You didn't do your best for the Lord. Helping them to understand that it's attitude, it's performance, it's a heart set, it's a mindset,
Right.
that kind of thing.
I've noticed that like when people when they leave the school, it's I feel like they can tend to treat it as piano lessons or these things that kids they do for a period. And it's like, okay, it's over. But it's an individual growth thing. Whereas, like you're saying, like Little League and stuff, like it's great. They may not get exposure to the Bible or whatever, depending on the league they're in. But that's like team building and stuff like that. But being in the ministry for the period of time that I've been, it's really started to click. I'm like, oh, people talk about all the time. Martial arts is about discipline and all these personal attributes, but it's really making you look internally more than other things that people do at that age. But yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from.
Yeah.